Oh, the SEC not been great for our friends down south here, Zach. I have three facts about the SEC here lately, and I want to get your reaction to those. And
Oh,
then if you have anything additional you would like to get to. So here's my three facts about how the dominance of the SEC is over. And quite honestly, when like you see way too early top 25s and stuff like that on the night of the national championship, because inevitably that's what happens. We can't just celebrate the national championship. Everybody has to get their way too early top 25s out there. We need to make sure there are not like 10 SEC teams in the top 25. Listen, the SEC teams, and it'll happen again this year. The SEC teams, I think it's the past 3 years. I need to go back and double check this, but the past 3 years, the SEC's preseason top 25 total has regressed at the end of the season every single year. That's not one of my facts. My first fact to give you, Zach, and get your take on is that in the last three college football playoffs, only one of the 9 teams has won a game versus a non-SEC Power 4 opponent. Can you guess who that team is?
I believe it was Texas beating Arizona State.
And Clemson too. They got 2 wins in
Oh,
this
yes, yes. They beat
but only
Clemson.
one of the 9 participants the past 3 years has beaten a Power 4 non-SEC team. Texas, that team wasn't even in the SEC
I
all
was
3
gonna
of
say,
those
so
years.
yeah, so the team that was a Big 12 team the year before.
Yes, exactly. Your thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, well, I think that is part of what we've been saying, right? Is everybody just kind of assumes that the SEC is better at the top because they're the SEC. But Texas kind of came into the league like gangbusters a year ago. And Oklahoma was beating a lot of teams this year. And now, granted, they were kind of the Big 12 top dogs. But yeah, like Texas is the only one that's won. And they beat two teams that, quite honestly, weren't all that great, right? They beat a subpar Clemson team, and they beat an Arizona State team that's coming off a bye that won one of the weaker Power 4 leagues, and they needed double overtime to do it. So, like, and Texas was a tough out. Like, I want to be very clear. Like Ohio State, they were only up 7 with what, a minute left in that game in the Cotton Bowl a year ago. But everybody else has fallen, and quite honestly, most of them have fallen hard. Right? So like you have Alabama in 2023, they got beaten overtime. That wasn't, that was a respectable loss, right?
I was
Yeah.
still like Nick Saban's last team though. That was the last thing I remember of him in the playoffs. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So you have a Nick Saban team losing um to Michigan, and then in 2024, I'm trying to think. So you have Georgia losing by two.
Tennessee,
Yeah, you
yeah,
have Georgia
Tennessee
losing by
gets
2 scores.
destroyed.
Tennessee gets
Georgia loses to
destroyed.
Notre Dame. Yep.
Um, Texas loses to Ohio State. They had another team in there too, right? Did they have 4 or did
Nope,
they
they
have
just
just have
had 3
3?
that
They
year.
just had 3 last year. And then this year, like Oklahoma gets eliminated by Alabama because Oklahoma stinks. And then Alabama gets wiped off the map. You have Texas A&M losing in their home stadium to Miami because they can't complete a forward pass, wind or no wind, I don't care. And then you have Ole Miss beating Georgia, who, by the way, Ole Miss doesn't have a coach. So the best team in the SEC that made it the furthest in the tournament is the team that apparently doesn't have the resources that Lane Kiffin needs to win, and B is the team without their head coach. So tell me how good this league is. Sorry, that you just asked me to respond to a fact. And that, by the way, Doug LaMaurice made that point. And I need to give him credit because he has been fighting for all of us in the North. But like, what are we doing? Your best, like the best and brightest of the SEC, the Georgia Bulldogs, go Dogs, gets beat by a coachless team.
Well, not only did they get beat, they got out coached. Like
Yes.
that's the thing with Kirby the past couple years is like he can outcoach teams in the SEC, but he didn't outcoach Pete Golding, right? He didn't outcoach Marcus Freeman last year. Like, I don't know how anybody can have Kirby Smart as their number one head coach going into next year. You have an inherent incredible SEC bias if you have him as the best head coach in all of college football still, after what we've seen the past few years. Did not make the playoffs 2 years ago. Last year they made the playoffs and they got beat by Notre Dame, got outcoached, and then this year they make the playoffs. They get outcoached by Pete Golding at Ole Miss. It has to be Kirk Cinetti is the best head coach in college football. I do not care if he wins or loses the national championship. He has to be the best.
Yeah. And that's not to say like Pete Golding could be great. Like that's,
he might be, but he also took over a month before that. Like,
yeah, you're right. So I'm just saying like the point is not that Pete Golding's bad. The point is Kirby Smart should be able to outcoach that guy right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't. Yeah. And so, all right, that was fact one. You have two other facts.
All right. Fact number two, the SEC has got five. They had 5 teams selected in the college football playoff this year. And obviously, like I just said, they couldn't beat a single Power 4 team outside of its conference. The ACC and the Big Ten combined had fewer teams in the playoffs. Those two conferences combined, the two conferences that are in the national championship, those two conferences combined had fewer teams in the playoffs. They will face off in the national championship. And if you add that stuff together, Oregon beat Texas Tech, Indiana beat Alabama, and Miami beat Ohio State and Ole Miss. That's 4 non-same conference Power 4 wins for those, and Texas A&M too. So that's 5.
Yep,
that's 5. And the 5 SEC teams that were in there could not get a single Power 4 win outside of against their conference. And I recognize the SEC played some of their conference teams, and stuff like that. I get that, but still, if you're this great big conference that people say you are, maybe you should be winning against other conferences.
Yep. And again, it's not like it's been close.
Nope.
Like it hasn't.
No. I mean, Ole Miss almost won that Miami game, but still, I mean, you saw Miami controlling that game the entire time.
Yeah. Ole Miss is very, and like Chambliss is great. But if one of those dropped interceptions becomes an interception, like 2 pick sixes that were dropped, like that game completely changes. But Miami played down to don't mistake that game as Ole Miss was great.
Mm-hmm.
That was Miami not playing. They were playing down.
Yeah. All right. Fact number 3. The SEC in the 12-team playoff only. The SEC is 5-8 overall in the playoffs. They are 3-6 against non-SEC teams, and only non-SEC wins that they have are against Clemson, Arizona State, and Tulane. Those are the only non-SEC wins that they have in the 12-team college football playoff. Those coming from Ole Miss and Texas. None from Alabama, none from Georgia. 2 teams that one team came from the Big 12, the other team Lane Kiffin thought you couldn't win with.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts?
They're mid. Like,
yep.
And I think it shoots a hole in what everybody wants to say is conference depth. It's mid depth. So like, I don't care if you have 16 Iowas. Like, no offense to Iowa. And actually, that's doing a disservice to Iowa.
I was gonna say I wouldn't use Iowa there. I'd use
16. Minnesota. It's not Minnesota. There's a lot of teams that are better than Minnesota in the SEC, but like Washington and Illinois, and I'm not saying everybody's them, but like it's like that caliber of play throughout. and like Georgia's just a little bit better. That's what I mean. It's why when I was breaking down Georgia Ole Miss, the more I watch Georgia, the more I'm like, people are thinking that their win over Alabama meant that Georgia got better. It wasn't that they got better. It was that Alabama stinks. And that they just like they were able to control the game because Alabama couldn't do anything offensively and they were too injured to do anything offensively. And so, like, of course, Ole Miss had a shot, not because Ole Miss was elite, but because Georgia had fool's gold wins. Which, what did we used to say that conference? What conference did we used to say that about?
Used to say it about the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think all of this just proves my point that I've been saying for a while now. And if you notice, a lot of the SEC people are saying what I've been saying for the past 2 years about coaching, right? I mean, all of them are saying, well, we need to get better coaches in here because we're just recycling coaches like the NFL does. Yeah, been saying it for 2 years. Like the coaches in the SEC are sticking around in the SEC and they're not as good as the coaches in the Big Ten. The Big Ten is going out and getting NFL talent. They're getting the best of the Big 12, the best of the ACC, and bringing them in there. Even in one of the worst possible hiring cycles for Michigan that there could possibly be. I know I said some things about that hire that I was not super fond of, but that was the worst possible situation for Michigan to hire a head coach in. And they went out and hired a future Hall of Famer and Kyle Whittingham, one of the best head coaches in, if not the best head coach in the Big 12. Like this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. If LSU was in one of their worst hiring cycles they would have ever had, they would have like hired Alex Golesh. And I'm not trying to say anything against Alex Golesh. He did a good job, but like that is what I'm trying to say is that the Big Ten is able to go out there and get some of these better coaches. Kyle Whittingham might be a miss in the Big Ten. And even if he is, it's still a better hire than some of the SEC teams are doing out there. And then on top of that, the SEC's not had elite quarterback play. I mean, that was a problem for the Big Ten for a while, and I think it's honestly one of the reasons why Ole Miss was able to excel this season. Ole Miss would not have gotten as far as they did with Austin Simmons if they started him all year long. Really, the SEC did not have elite quarterback play this year. Gunnar Stockton was one of your best quarterbacks, and Gunnar Stockton's fine. I'm not going to say he's a bad quarterback because he's not. But he's not a game changer. He's not somebody that's going to go out there, and be this incredible guy that's going to make these incredible plays and win it for you. He's been very good in the fourth quarter this season at times, but he's not one of those guys like a Trinidad Chambliss who is able to go out there and just almost essentially win the game for you. That Trinidad Chambliss was honestly probably the best quarterback in the SEC this season.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's a doubt.
Yeah, I mean. I can't think of any, like Arch Manning came on later in the year, but I don't think he came on to the extent, like he had a really good game against Michigan, but I still feel like Trinidad Chambliss had a better, showing in the postseason overall. Ty Simpson was okay at times, but toward the end he was not. So
yeah, I that's to me, I think that's the biggest. So I'll say three things. I think coaching, quarterback play, and they don't have the depth that they used to. And so, like, you think about those old Bama teams, it was like they just kept rolling out dude after dude after dude. And they don't have that anymore. And part of that's NIL. Part of that is coaches doing a better job of identifying talent. But I just think all of the intangible strengths favor the Big Ten. Sorry, not Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State's in the Big Ten, but they all favor the Big Ten, which, I've seen a couple of people come out like Josh Payton, Cole Kubelik were talking about this, that you can't look at the postseason and determine what conference is the best. Which I can understand that. And to Pate's credit, he's maintained that even before NIL and transfer portal really took off. But I think if you're going to sit there and tell me that it doesn't matter at all, or it doesn't help shape perception at all, I would say you're nuts. And I think the perfect example is Iowa Vandy. And I want to get to this comment here because Trojan Fight said something that I wanted to maybe push back on a little bit. He's talking about Oregon, saying past defense was overrated, inflated rankings of playing bad teams over and over and over. And listen, I don't think Oregon played a ton of great teams that could throw the ball, right? I think that's a fair, a fair thing to say. But
they played Washington at home. They played USC.
Right.
They played Rutgers. Like they played some of the better passing offenses in the Big Ten this season.
Right. Well, and here's the thing: they played Iowa, who actually did a pretty good job of passing the ball on Vandy. They played USC. They played at Washington. They played Indiana.
Yeah.
So and they played Penn State with Drew Aller, which I know people will say that's not a good team, but like Drew Aller at least has tools. And my point in saying that is you can say that they're overrated because they didn't play anybody. But then if you're going to say that about them, then what are you going to say about Vandy? What do you say about Alabama when they played their 4-game stretch of really hard teams? And I think that's where this conversation needs to go, is the reason why we keep spinning our wheels and saying this team's overrated, this team's underrated, is because you go to the preseason at there's 11 teams in the preseason that the SEC's ranked. Sankey is saying 7 teams out of the SEC should be in the CFP. Because
I think that was a fake quote. I don't think that quote was real.
Okay, it better not be.
Yeah, I think that was a fake quote. That was one of those classic Twitter fake quoters that got some people.
Oh, well, it got me. But anyway, my point in saying that is we have this tendency to overinflate the accomplishments of the SEC because of past history. But we kind of go after the good things about teams like Oregon. And my plea to all of us, and again, I'm Doug LaMaurice has been fighting this fight, so I'm giving him a ton of credit on this too. Actually, I'm giving him a lot more than just some. But this has got to stop, this madness and this thinking, because Oregon played some good passing teams this year. That we should not bring that argument as we're talking about Indiana beating the brakes off of Oregon tonight. Oregon was a dang good team and playing some pretty good offenses and were very good defensively. And Indiana ran through them tonight.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of the same thing that happened with Illinois, right? Indiana destroys Illinois and everybody would say, oh, Illinois overrated. I feel like, especially when it comes to Big Ten stuff, and I get rivalries. I'm not getting on Trojan Fight at all. Like, he's a USC fan. They don't like Oregon. Yeah. Oregon doesn't like them. Listen, I'd be saying the same stuff about Michigan. All right. That's where I draw the line whenever I'm like, like want other teams in your conference to do well when it's your rival. No, preserve rivalries. Rivalries are so much more important in college football than anything else. So trash talk your rival, especially in this situation. If you're a USC fan, trash talk Oregon to the high heavens. because that's your rival, and this stuff doesn't always happen. I wouldn't want it to happen if I'm an Oregon fan, but I get it. But as far as I'm concerned, a lot of this starts with the public perception in the preseason polls, and I know Doug and I don't always line up on that kind of stuff, but I do think that the preseason poll perception and stuff like that is going to be very important this year, because if you do have LSU like in the top 10, some of these other teams, then it is going to be a major concern. I mean, I'm just spitballing right now. We can end on this, Zach. I'm just spitballing right now. Like,
can I say one more thing after you're okay? But yeah,
if I was going to put together my top 5 for next season, like my way too early top 5, and I'm not like, I'm kind of making this up as I go along here. So if anybody has a, like a suggestion in the chat, please do put it in there, because I'd love to kind of think through that a little bit. I have Indiana in there. I have Texas Tech in there. I think Ohio State in there. I know they've lost some depth in the portal, but I still think they're going to have a really good starting lineup. I have, honestly, maybe Oregon as well. And then I probably have Miami in there as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think through some other teams that I might be missing on. I mean, you could talk about Alabama or Georgia, but what did we really see from them to give us a whole lot of confidence in that? Like,
Nothing.
I don't know. So I think there probably needs to be, and Notre Dame, I think could probably be up there too. Maybe Notre Dame over Miami.
I think Notre Dame should probably be a top 5 team.
Yeah. So if I'm going with some teams there, Plantis says Texas, maybe. Archie's coming back. So yeah, maybe that's probably your best SEC team that's going to be up there. Joe says if LSU's in the preseason top 5, I'm leaving the country. Let us know where Paul goes if you're going with him there, Joe.
Yeah,
fine, Paul. Yeah, no, I think Texas is a good one there. Yeah, if I'm making my top 25 just off the top of my head right now, it's probably not in this order, but probably Indiana, Texas Tech, Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, maybe Texas is up there. Maybe Miami. I want to see what Miami does in the portal.
Yeah.
But then the Penn State Cyclones, of course, the Penn State Cyclones.
Yeah. Penn State will probably be ranked closer to mid to end of season because of their schedule. That'd be my guess.
I'll probably have Penn State top 15. I don't know. I'm a little hesitant with them. I don't know. Maybe I should have them top 10. I'd have to review stuff a whole lot more, but I'm definitely going to have Penn State ranked in my way too early top 25.
Yeah, I'll probably have them ranked, just not super high. Here, I've heard already the kind of the revisionist history, and like Peyton Kubelik kind of perpetuated it, and I understand people not wanting to take the postseason and bowl games seriously, and say it can't be the end all be all, which I agree with Pate and Kubelik on that. But I push back to say that it means nothing. It means something.
Everything means something. You can't just say this didn't work out for us, so this means nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think they were necessarily arguing this, but I think people might hear what they were saying and just say bowl games don't matter because of XYZ. Listen, the fact that Iowa like beat the crud out of Vandy up front matters. The fact that Illinois has now beat 2 SEC quote unquote hard teams in back-to-back years. Yes, neither team was at full strength. You don't know what to take about it. But here's what it means is it means that the depth of the Big Ten is as good, if not better, than the depth of the SEC, which has been the main argument for keeping the SEC around the top for the past couple years. And this narrative needs to die that the middle of the Big Ten isn't as good as the middle of the SEC.
Yeah, especially if you look at transfer portal rankings right now. I mean, some of your best teams in the transfer portal, obviously Indiana, number 1 in the Big Ten. Do you know who number 2 is, Zach, on 3?
I do not.
Purdue.
Look out, Barry Odom.
And then Wisconsin, UCLA, Nebraska, Maryland, Northwestern, Illinois. Listen, UCLA might be really good next year. I'm not saying really good, like playoff good, but that might be a team that is top 25 at the end of the season. And not might be. I think they very well could be. I would not be surprised if UCLA loses 4 or less games next year, including the bowl game.
Yep.
So
there's a lot. Well, and it goes back to something you said. You look at the coaching lineup between these two conferences, the Big Ten is running circles around the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, get ready for some possible parity too, because you know who the 3 worst teams in the transfer portal are right now in the Big Ten?
Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State.
It's true. Yeah. So
you kind of set me up for that one when you talked about parity, but
yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have Ohio State in my top 5. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be very interesting. When we do our top 25s, we will reveal them here on the podcast. We won't like tweet them out or anything like that. You'll hear about them here on the podcast.